Press, and I'm recording as well. Okay, all right. Well, Chris, I am a 57-year-old wife, mother, stepmom, conservative, pro-life Christian worship leader, uh, cyclist, Alabama born, 30-year resident of Georgia, relocated back to Alabama. So that's kind of my story. Who is Chris Hicks?
Okay, I'm also a pro-life Christian. I have two bicycles, but I wouldn't call myself a cyclist. And but I so historically, Myrna, I'm a sales consultant and have done a lot of sales consulting work in about a little over 50 countries around the world. And I also am a person who has throughout my life been very fortunate that I'm able to, when I see things that I think aren't quite right or don't look right to me, and I think it's something that very few other people would tend to raise questions about, I'm that guy. So I'm the Don Quixote type. Only I've been called that a lot of times, unlike Don Quixote, if I stick with it long enough, and I will, a lot of times the windmills come down. But so obviously we're here to talk about baby boxes and safe havening and those kind of things. And I was just a pro-life Christian, right wing conservative, and kind of got serendipitously involved in baby boxes because of some events in the township I live in Ohio.
Okay, and we're going to get to that. You are a parent.
I have one son who is a recent college graduate and thankfully is gainfully employed. And my wife and I have been married for 32 years.
Oh, very good. And tell us where you live, just so make sure we have that.
Yeah, I live
Uh,
in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. So in suburban Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati's in a county called Hamilton County in Ohio. I live in Claremont County, which is due east of Hamilton County.
all right, very good, very good. And I like the description that you gave. I was looking at the end of an opinions piece that you wrote, and you described yourself as an outspoken advocate for clean government with politics, for clean government and
Right.
politics in Claremont County and beyond.
Cor- Correct.
So that,
So I'm a person who's very much in favor of transparency, open government, uh, legitimate campaign finance, engagement of people, not manipulation of them. So I have a kind of a long history of being involved in various types of litigation against crooked government stuff. So, and I'm glad to say that I think at this point, I'm the first person who, other than somebody who took a plea deal, that has somebody actually held accountable for things involving, in Ohio, we had a big corruption scandal involving a Speaker of the House named Larry Householder. And so I've just been involved in a lot of things that have involved trying to drive accountability within the political system. And this kind of intersected that a little bit because I originally got involved because my township trustees where I live put in a baby box and they paid for it with all taxpayer money. And then I went and researched a little bit baby boxes, and supposedly they were all being funded by donations. So that caused me to start to question at first, why didn't we do a fund drive to raise the money for it versus use taxpayer money? And that kind of led me down a path where I got a lot more understanding of baby boxes and more that I ever wanted to know about safe haven laws, or thought I could know maybe about safe haven laws, adoption, and custody options, programs available. Now I'm probably at least in the top 5% of Ohioans knowledgeable about our state's what our state has and what our laws are on those things.
yep, you and me both. And you said you have a history of, tell me, how long you have been advocating and, how you described it. Just give me an idea.
Yeah, I had in my life, I've probably had up until about 2016, I had maybe a couple of things where I was involved with, which were kind of a government accountability transparency thing. And then from 2016 on, I became a lot more involved. So I was, whether it's a good or bad thing, I was a fervent Trump supporter, got involved in the local political system as a result of that, and then saw just a lot of, things that were very questionable to me from an ethical and moral standpoint going on. And so since 2016, I've been almost continuously involved in different things around government ethics, accountability, and transparency.
Hmm. And you and you didn't know hardly anything about the safe haven, just the law. I mean, is that had you ever you'd heard of it?
Yeah, I tell people that I was probably casually aware of safe haven law and the ability to surrender a baby with no consequences. But I'm probably like, anybody either apart from people completely ignorant of the law, I guess the next level would be people that are mostly maybe have heard of it, but really don't know any of the details. And I think it's a very small number of people, even in a state like Ohio that's had the law for over 20 years now, that has much of any real knowledge of what the rules are and what the law is about.
Hmm. Had you ever heard of the National Safe Haven Alliance?
I've heard of it. I'm not really familiar with it. I've heard of it since I became knowledgeable. There's a couple organizations that I've become familiar with. Some of them I've talked to people in, some not. I believe I called somebody from the National Safe Haven Alliance maybe a month ago, and I talked to somebody for about 20 minutes about their organization, but I don't really know anybody there.
Hmm. So you got involved, or you got wind, I should say, of Safe Haven baby boxes because they put one in your community. Before then, you weren't aware that there were baby boxes in
No,
other
I had
parts
no awareness
of
that
the
baby
area,
boxes
right?
were a
Yeah.
thing until one came to my community.
And you said you wondered why um, tax why there wasn't fundraising done. How did
Correct.
you know that? Yeah.
Yeah, because I went out and looked at and actually, I think it's the 2020 Safe Haven Baby Box report. It says they use no taxpayer money. So I've come to find out that that's really not at all true. I think most of them in Ohio have used, taxpayer money to put the boxes in versus fundraising. I think there's only 7 boxes in Ohio, so it's not a big number. And I'm not really. There's I believe, 5 at fire stations, and 3 at hospitals or medical facilities.
So what did you, when you learned this, what did you do next? Who did you reach out to?
Well, originally I'm a very inquisitive person. And so I became kind of, when I looked at the signage and I printed out here, I looked at, this is not our box. It might be our box. It's not our box, but this is a picture of a safe haven baby box. And I looked at the signage on the box, and it has nothing about regular safe haven, nothing about getting personal help. If knock on this fire station door if you want personal assistance. Nothing about the local, where to go for local medical care, where the closest hospital is. Nothing other than, a logo of a private company and a phone number that's their phone number on the box. So I thought, like, well, why isn't there information on this about, adoption, about where to get local help, places, etc. So that caused me to dig even deeper, and then I asked for and got a copy of the materials that were in the box, and so once I saw those, I became even more concerned because they were mostly promotional materials for Safe Haven Baby Box Company, and there was what I thought was a completely half-baked medical Q&A, and there was a private baby registry form in there. So that just caused me to get more and more concerned with what these things were, who was behind them, and were they really helping, or were they more, helping somebody make money off a safe haven and maybe stigmatizing a traditional safe haven?
Okay, and just by explanation, we all just went off camera because I think that was using up, uh, whatever power and making it was very hard to hear you, and it was a lag. So that's why we just all went off the camera.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so getting back, so you realized you looked you did you checked into it, and did you reach out to any elected officials? Did you
So
share your
so what
concerns?
happened, Marina, was I started vocalizing my concerns, and I went to a township trustee to vocalize meeting to vocalize the concerns. And I think it was June 14th of this past year. When I went to the meeting, Monica Kelsey showed up at the meeting, and then after I spoke, she spoke, and she said that there was a mistake on the paperwork, and there was a new brochure, and she had given it to the fire chief, and so then I asked her if I could have a copy, and she refused. Then I went and asked the fire chief if I could have a copy, and he said she never gave him anything. And that kind of led to a series of events where, next thing I knew, within a couple of days, there were 6 TikTok videos on Safe Haven Baby Box's TikTok page attacking me as some sort of weirdo that supposedly followed her to a bathroom, et cetera, that was all completely false. And that just caused me to be like, what is going on? When asking for a copy of a brochure and vocalizing any criticism causes a reaction like this. And I think I told you once when we talked a long time ago, I know a lot of, I'm very pro-life, but I know people that are really, invested, spend a lot of their time on the pro-life cause. And I never saw somebody like this that was so kind of in your face, so like attacking people, so demonizing of anybody that asked any hard questions. And so that kind of pressure back on me, or that bullying back on me, is the kind of thing that just causes me to want to dig in further to figure out what's going on.
And why do you think that, I'll just say that you all are at odds? Is that a good description of the relationship, if you will?
Well, I think I don't have I'm not making money off of Safe Haven. I'm not going from fire station to fire station selling, $10,000 boxes. And I started asking the kind of questions of, what do we really want to have happen? So to me, and when I talk to pro-life friends I have, when you say, what do you really want to have happen when there's an unplanned pregnancy involving a woman, is first and foremost, you want that woman to come forward, get proper prenatal care, have a proper medical delivery, be well informed on her adoption and custody options, as well as options to help her raise her baby. And so what I saw happening with these, and I showed you the box that had nothing about traditional safe haven, nothing about where to get information on adoption or custody options. To me, the whole approach is backwards. And so, Safe Haven Baby Boxes uses all these taglines, and all of the taglines to me are contradictory. One of their big ones, if you go to their websites, it says anonymity matters. But what do they actually do is if there's ever a surrender at one of their boxes, within a day or two, they do a press conference at the box about there was a surrender. How does that support anonymity? They say no shame, no blame. But then their marketing materials show women concealing themselves in hoodies, putting babies in boxes in a dark alley behind a fire station. Okay? They talk about saving babies from dumpsters, but when she actually does training of firemen, she tells them that the boxes have nothing to do with that, because the reality is somebody that puts their baby in a dumpster is not a person wanting their baby to live or to be found. So there's these inconsistencies that I think are actually antithetical to where the pro-life movement should be. I think the pro-life movement should be about destigmatizing people coming forward, getting proper, loving prenatal care, proper medical delivery, knowing about their adoption and how to keep their baby and raise their baby, and also their custody options, which means, for example, being able to put your baby's custody with your mom or your grandmother until you're ready to take full charge of your baby. They should know that. I just can't. I know I'm going on and on, but as a pro-lifer, the notion that we would be behind something that could leave a woman a year or two down the line feeling like they got exploited, that they got conned into put your baby in a box and slam the door, and never knew about options that could have helped them to raise their own baby, to keep connection, like open adoption to keep connection with their own baby. That is just morally and ethically wrong to me. So when you say like we're at odds, I think the at odds is what's the right story, what's the right approach for the pro-life movement to be behind. And I think going back to a medieval concept of put your baby in a box is not the image as pro-lifers we would want to have, is being loving people that want women who find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy to get help that they need. And I'll say one last thing, and I got, Monica Kelsey's good at attacking things people say, is I've always said the same thing about boxes, is do I think that there is a place for boxes? Maybe, but that place should start at hospitals where there's 24/7 medical personnel present that can render immediate aid to both a baby and to a mom if it's needed. So I'm not saying there's not a place. The reality is that there is a extremely small segment of people that are these kind of cases that Monica Kelsey loves to post on her Facebook page. The most extreme examples being the reason why we need to have a box at every fire station. It's much like, as a pro-lifer, it's much like me listening to the pro-abortion community say, well, because there could be rape or incest, we should allow abortion in all cases. No, that's not, I guess people could have debates about, I'm a straight up and down pro-lifer in all cases, but I guess people could have debates about some of those situations. But also the same thing, to act like the best approach for women when unplanned pregnancies is to have their babies and put them in boxes is just wrong. And to steer women away from personal connection, because another part of it I think that comes into play when I've talked to some places that are, for example, crisis pregnancy centers, is that if you get women that are in the quadrant, the very small percent that might, be in this super at-risk category, one of the most important things with them is to get them into some sort of personal connection where there can be some proper counseling. And then they can look at what are their adoption options, open and closed adoption, et cetera. So I know I've gone on a little bit describing this, but when you say, what I describe as at odds, I'd say we're fundamentally have a different view of how the pro-life community should be reacting. And right now, I'm kind of the odd man out because people love, in America and everywhere, I guess, people love to find something where they can just feel like I washed my hands of it. As long as if we put a box in our fire station, then all of the problems that led to a woman ever being to the point of putting their baby in a box and slamming a door behind it, I don't have to worry about. And in reality, I think the pro-life community and the people I know are much more loving than that, and much more caring than that, and much more compassionate of that. And when they stop and think about it, they realize this isn't the kind of thing that really is in the best interest of women. And it's not in the best interest of pro-life to start treating babies like they're just some disposable thing you can put in a box, like returning a book at a library. That's not what this should be about. So again, I apologize for going on so long, but I have, some history with this, and I have some passion with it, because I don't think that message that I'm giving gets told. And it does. And when it does, it causes people to start to think, what is the real best response of the pro-life community, especially in a post Roe v. Wade world?
So, and I have my question, I've kind of lost my train of thought. Chris, you, you are, Grace, do you have, I need to I need to gather my thoughts. I've lost my train of thought. Is there a question that you have?
Yeah, I would love to hear, kind of in light of all of those things, if they were to take those considerations into, if they were to take that into consideration, is there a circumstance you'd ever feel comfortable with the baby boxes? I know you touched a little on maybe putting them at a hospital or a way to make that work.
Um, yeah, because I do think, and this gets, if Monica I'll get like a TikTok video on me if this is said, but I've talked to several crisis pregnancy centers that I haven't talked to any what I would visualize as a disreputable crisis pregnancy centers. The couple that I've talked to have been very knowledgeable, and the reality of women that would get to the point of this kind of thing of putting a baby in a box, if it gets to that point, I hear, there can be a very small percentage if that they can't be intercepted beforehand to get into a proper counseling and so forth, where this could come into play. But in most of those cases, it involves some sort of mental health issues or drug addiction issues. So it is a very outlier thing, and even in those cases, the goal would be to try to engage that woman early, because definitely if there's a drug addiction problem, to get proper prenatal care and not having certain behaviors that could affect the baby taking place. But again, I think that, frankly, I think that the main purpose of any of this, of safe haven, I think we all as pro-lifers should be that, to be honest, that babies never get safe havened. Because safe haven means a very specific thing, a 30 days anonymous confidential surrender period in most states, or in Ohio it's 30 days, for surrendering a baby at a police station, fire station, or hospital. What we should really want is more well-informed moms to be in programs for adoption, custody, and those are not considered safe haven. So safe haven, even by way of discussion, people don't realize that the number one way that babies get surrendered or abandoned in America, by like a factor of, literally 1,000, 10,000 to 1, is by them being born in a hospital and not being retrieved, and that is not considered safe haven either. That's considered being a border baby. So there's this very narrow thing that's safe haven, which is best done personal, where there's a personal connection. There can be some things like in Ohio, we have an anonymous voluntary health history form that, for example, a first responder might ask a woman, would you be comfortable filling this out anonymously so that we know some history on the baby? So boxes should be to me, a very small subset of that, but the goal ultimately should be that boxes never get used, that safe haven never has to be used, because women get into proper counseling so that they're going through proper, if they want to give up their baby, they're going through a proper adoption process of open and closed adoption versus just safe havening a baby.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you said you want women to be informed. In an age where there is often information overload, is it reasonable to think that the information that is out there, that hasn't made much of a difference? We are still having this problem. So is it information? Is that the answer?
Well, so let me ask you a question, then I'll answer your question as, I'll ask it rhetorically right now, is what is the problem? So you said the problem, okay? And what's the magnitude of the problem and so forth? And so as it comes to information, I think that, for example, and I have this example, so we're starting to see in the county I live in a lot of signs getting put up on fire stations, police stations, and law enforcement agencies and hospitals just about basic safe haven and the option for safe haven, to just raise awareness of it. And I think that raising of awareness of it is 95% of the fight, because I think you mentioned, how much information. I don't think that a lot of people have a lot of information on these topics. And I'm not sure how many, young women, in a crisis, know these things about adoption. I would hope that I'm sure that a vast majority in that situation, if they're not getting loving support from their own family, are hopefully finding crisis pregnancy centers and other places where they can get that kind of loving support. But I think that there is a element of people that are just not informed. And I personally have tried, for example, I think every state, Ohio is one of them, and the counties need to do a better job of how people engage government where government's involved in these things. I call, I joke with somebody, I just said to somebody today, is I called in my county the place that theoretically you would call if you wanted to put a baby up for adoption. And that was about 2 months ago, and I've yet to get a call back. And so I think there's a lot of slip between the cracks things that are actually more important that we get fixed, especially in a post Roe v. Wade world, than we be investing tons of money and putting boxes on the sides of buildings. I think basic information on the buildings about safe haven solves the problem really. And then I think there's other things we need to do. Like in Ohio, we have a state number called Help Me Grow. I'm working with somebody to get that number expanded to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's things like that that I think are the vehicles that need to be there, because I think there is, definitely in maybe some of the people that would be young people and so forth that get into the situation, there is some gaps in information, or there can be false information as to what could happen. They might be afraid to come to a police station because they think they're going to get arrested or something because they don't know the basics of the safe haven law, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned county, different agencies, some conversations that you've had. I believe you also reached out to the state Department of
Health.
or maybe what I can't recall the exact agency that you reached out to.
Ohio Department of Health.
Right, yes. And Indiana as well, right?
Right.
You also
Department of Child Services.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about the response and what you make of that.
First thing, I think that Safe Haven Baby Box and Monica Kelsey has been successful in part due to an extreme amount of bullying of people in these agencies. And I think that is absolutely true in Indiana, and I think it's absolutely true in Ohio as well. So in Ohio, we have what's called the revised code, which is the laws, and we have the administrative code. So a lot of times a law might say you can have baby boxes, but the Department of Health has to promulgate the rules around baby boxes. So that's where the Department of Health gets involved. And so they have a set of rules. Frankly, the rules could be unbelievably better than they are and more thought through than they are. But they get bullied to just set rules that are what Miss Kelsey wants. And in Indiana, she has largely been successful doing that to the degree, and I shared with you, Myrna, some stuff on this, but, to the degree that when I dug in and got to people in Department of Child Services, it's almost like they have post-traumatic stress. And they actually I asked who enforces the laws about baby boxes in Indiana, and they actually referred me to Safe Haven Baby Box ultimately. And so it's like, okay. And I've already found that in Indiana, I think your listeners might not be aware, but part of what I found in Ohio was there were 5 different areas, or more than that, let me count them up. There were a bunch of different areas in which the laws were being broken around these boxes, involving logging according to the Ohio law, staffing at the boxes, inclusion of Department of Jobs and Family Services brochures that need to be there, and a form for anonymous health history. Places weren't getting building permits. They were putting materials in the baby bassinet, which is not legal in Ohio because of strangulation risks and so forth. They were putting them not in the proper legal locations. And they were putting them in places where there were cameras monitoring the boxes. So I found all these legal things going on in Ohio. It started making me think, Well, if she so brazenly violates the law in Ohio, she might do it in Indiana. And so that's why I contacted Indiana, and I found in Indiana that it's going on there too, where there's baby boxes in locations that legally aren't supposed to be having those baby boxes. And that's what caused me to reach out to the Department of Child Services in Indiana. And, and they basically, nobody's enforcing the laws in Indiana around the baby boxes there because they get smeared in the press if they do anything or say anything about what's going on. In Ohio, the same kind of things going on. I think Ohio is a little bit different than Indiana, and or a lot different than Indiana. But the same thing goes on. When Ohio Department of Health, Monica, there's a process every 5 years in Ohio of rule review. So the part that I said administrative code, and that just happened for baby box rules over the summer. I participated in the process. I sent in feedback when I was supposed to. I attended the meeting, blah, 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 blah. Monica Kelsey did nothing. Then she started making a bunch of demands that a Department of Health needs to meet with her and with her alone. And then when they didn't immediately respond, she proceeded to have 43 days worth of TikTok videos attacking the Ohio Department of Health. Eventually, they agreed to have a meeting with her. And then she wanted to have fire chiefs of places in Ohio that had boxes, which, by the way, at that point in time, most of them were under investigation by the Department of Health for violating the law. And she wanted to have them in the meeting, and the Department of Health said, well, we want to have the meeting just with you, not with these fire chiefs. And then she backed out of the meeting. So there's this pattern of kind of like, I think it's really bad, frankly. It's a combination of like this bullying and this emotional appeal that if you don't buy these boxes, babies end up in dumpsters, a money motive, and then do what we say or else type of mentality, or you're going to get attacked and smeared. And I don't respond well to that, and I'm hoping that the Ohio Department of Health doesn't. And I don't know what to do in Indiana. I'm going to continue to pursue Indiana because there's locations that are violating the laws, and I think the Department of Child Services there is afraid to do anything to raise a finger to enforce their laws there.
And you may have addressed this already when I asked about the elected officials that you have spoken with, at different meetings.
Yeah.
You've been at the podium, and what has been the response from your elected officials?
Very negative towards me because I think the one of the things that I describe it as a unproductive mix of the emotion, the money motive, it's now my life's avocation to do these boxes. It's got to be this way, the bullying. So, one of the parts of that is I think that for politicians, political type people, which I know very well, this is a great photo op opportunity. So if we get a baby box in our town or our township, we have a big event, we all put on our nice shirts, we get a photo op, we get a local news story about how pro-life we are and how we did this box, and so it becomes a toxic mix where you have a certain type of politician that loves this. And the funny thing about it is, a result, if you go look at safe haven baby boxes and their locations, they're almost always in very red conservative areas. You're not going to find them in urban metro areas through the government. Maybe a hospital might do it, but because the approach, because it becomes kind of this virtue signal, and I'm against virtue signaling on either side, left or right, on things. And so I think that the politicians, especially when they've invested in them, they love this, they want it to be part of their resume of what a great pro-life politician they are. The funny thing is, and I'm not going to mention the actual location, because in Ohio, there's a location that has had a baby box ready to activate for now 4 or 5 months, that was purchased by a prior regime before an election in that area. And I think they'll ultimately go live with the box at some point, but it's a different politicians that that have stepped back and are thinking about what really needs to happen with this. And so they've never activated the box. And I'm hopeful, a lot of things like, just in Ohio, getting signs on every police station, fire station, and hospital about safe haven, that people step back and realize there can be much more effective approaches that are much lower cost and also reinforce what I think are positive things about mothers or expectant mothers getting proper prenatal care, proper medical delivery, and being well informed on their adoption and custody options.
Let me ask you about the ethical and moral implications of the so-called baby registry that you mentioned.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So, it's one of those things, Marin, I'd say that, they have this tagline, anonymity matters, but we do a private, that's what Safe Haven Baby Box says, but they do press events whenever there's a baby surrender at the box, which, by the way, in a small town would tend to out, wasn't so-and-so pregnant and she's not pregnant anymore, tend to out the person. So they have this kind of, anonymity matters mantra, but they do these press events. But in addition, in the box, they include a private baby registry form that goes to Safe Haven Baby Box, and they track these babies. And if you go to their website, went out there to check something to see if there had been any other boxes activated. They tout all these stories of here's baby so-and-so, here's baby Samuel, here's baby Nola, here's baby this. They use them in press events. They use them in fundraising events. We're going to have all the babies come up on stage. And a lot of people might not think about this. The more I've thought about it, the more I've talked to people in the adoptee community, this is just wrong. It's just morally and ethically wrong that these babies are then, because they got put in a box, they're becoming part of a marketing engine they never agreed to be part of, to promote boxes and donations to a company. And while I appreciate that maybe some of the people that get involved in doing this might not think it through or think about it, but what I've learned is that in adoptees, there's a higher instance of certain mental health issues. And because no matter how loving your adoptee family is, you always have in this back of your mind this thing of a little issue of self-worth and what happened to me, why did I get my mom or dad put me up for adoption. And so what I've talked from mental health people and adoptee rights people is just how this use of the babies that have been put in boxes in a private registry and in promotion of a company and in promotion of boxes and come up on stage, not only to me is morally and ethically wrong, but it has the potential for creating longer term implications for these kids when they get to the age and realize how they were used and exploited during this process.
Is it not an example of something that was, was meant for evil, a baby abandoned in a dumpster or whatever, and now this child has, two parents who love them and a forever home?
But that's the marketing line. so that's the, forever home, this type of thing. Here's what I want to understand is under state law in Ohio, a safe haven baby, whether via a box or by a hand-to-hand, all of that's supposed to be completely confidential. So think about that for a second. Completely confidential. One of the reasons, Marina, it's confidential is because history has shown that people who safe haven a baby, in about 25% of the cases, come back there's usually a 30 or 60 day period where they can come back and request reunification with their baby if they change their mind. So a lot of, I do not understand, other than through bullying, why this private company gets any information just because they happen to have made the physical appliance of a box. Now they forever get to have information on any baby that's put in one of those boxes. Do I get to, can I go say like, well, I'll make a brochure for the fire department in my area, and that means from then on, I'm allowed to have all kind of personal and confidential information about babies that might be surrendered under safe haven? So I believe that the revelation of that information to a private company in Ohio, at least, and I think also in Indiana, when I start looking at it all, is illegal on the surface. These are supposed to be confidential things that a mother gives up a baby through safe haven. When you're a mom, if you were a mom and you give up a baby through traditional safe haven or in a box, are you counting on then? Monica Kelsey likes to say, well, that moms appreciate this because then they can watch their baby they gave up in a box grow up through stuff they've read on Safe Haven Baby Box's site. That's an awful convenient excuse for basically exploiting babies for financial gain through donations and otherwise. And if the baby is with a forever family, that's fantastic. That forever, being with a forever family shouldn't be about using the baby to promote donations to a private company.
Mhm. Let's talk about the safety of the baby boxes quickly.
Yeah.
Safe Haven Baby Boxes says that in terms of a UL listing, not legally required. FDA, they don't sell the boxes, so that there's no requirement, there's no required approval by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. They partner with a third party for performance testing, so and there's no legislation mandating certification, by a UL listing or so. How do you? All of those boxes seem to be checked in terms of the safety of.
Tell me what box was checked. You just said that they had no UL listing, they have no FDA approval, they have no Consumer Product Safety Commission approval, and that supposedly some company had done some safety testing on them that we can't see the information, and that means all the boxes are checked.
And that it's not illegal. It's not legally required.
I would dispute that, by the way, on UL listing. Okay. So the question would be, if you tried to put a non-UL listed device appliance in your house in a wall. Okay. So remember, this is a appliance that it requires a 15 amp breaker that is put in the exterior wall of a building exposed to rain, snow, and other elements. That is electric. Okay. If you put that thing, something like that, in the wall of your house, it would not be covered under your insurance. If it lit your house on fire and your house burned down, they would not pay. So what happens here is, because of the tie to governmental entities, I think there gets to be kind of a gray area where governmental entities, and the fact that, and you mentioned it, Myrna, is, because you even said, I think your words were something to the effect of, since they don't sell the boxes, they don't need to have Consumer Product Safety Commission. So that's something people should need to know, is that Safe Haven Baby Box won't sell their boxes. They lease them. Why do they lease them instead of sell them? Because they can avoid regulation. The reason they do that is to avoid required regulation for safety. In what world would a legitimate pro-lifer view that a shenanigans like that, well, if we lease it versus sell it, we won't be required to have regulatory approval, and that's good. Now, about a month ago, she did a thing in which she said she was going to get, when they moved the production in-house, then at some point in the future, they're going to get UL listing, but they didn't get UL listing at first because they didn't have the money. It was too complicated. That's not a good excuse. That's a ridiculous excuse. And the notion that any of us who are pro-lifers would think that's okay, or that we would give a pass, that somebody can say, well, we've had some sort of, what's the name of the company, Intertech, or some company did some independent safety testing. Well, where is that safety testing? Why isn't it on the Safe Haven Baby Box website then? If they're so proud of that testing, why is it hidden? And as I've pointed out, other people have pointed out, I'm trying to look for something in my office here that is, if I went to the dollar store and bought a dollar lamp, it's going to have a UL listing on it if it plugs into electric. So I think that this whole notion of safety is, the reality is that over 90% of these boxes have never been used. Never been used. Okay? They do not have proper safety testing. And I'm not going to accept that just somebody says, well, there's somebody that did some testing, but you're not allowed to see it, but just trust us. Okay. They are not UL listed. They try to do everything they can, even adjusting their quote unquote sales model to avoid having any regulatory approval required on the boxes. Who would do that? I'm thinking if you're raising money for this and you went and told a community of investors, we need some money to do the proper safety testing for a device that the pro-life movement needs to align behind, I don't think there'd be a problem getting money. I don't think there's a lot of pro-lifers would say like, oh no, we just oh man, we don't want to have to spend the money on the electrical approvals that we see on every device in our homes. That would be a waste of money for this. So I think there is, I don't think any of the boxes are checked. And I frankly get tired of people in the media and otherwise giving a pass on it. We wouldn't if we're okay. So let's imagine, Myrna, for a second here. So you and I are both pro-life, and Grace, I'm assuming you're pro-life too. What would we be saying in the pro-life community if we found out that abortion clinics were not using medical devices to do abortions that had no safety approvals, no testing, no nothing? We'd be making an issue out of that, wouldn't we? That this is unsafe. And I will throw on top of all this, there was a box at a place in Ohio called BSTG. It's in Sunbury, Ohio. You're not going to find it listed on the Safe Haven Baby Box site. It's the 8th box. And there's a 9th box I know of, the one that never has been activated. It's not listed there. That box, for 4 months, I called them and talked to them. The alarm didn't work right and they couldn't get it fixed. Eventually to the point that they took it off the Safe Haven Baby Box website entirely. And I pointed it out, and then I was a bad guy for pointing this out. Here's something. If these devices, what Monica Kelsey, one of her big things, and you haven't asked me about it, is one of her big bully things is that she wants these boxes to be able to be in locations that are not staffed. And so, an alarm on the box is going to alert first.
Wait.
Yes.
What did you repeat that?
She wants the boxes to be in locations that are not staffed.
You broke up.
And so when she does, that's her big push in Ohio. She will do anything she can to get somebody to, slip into a law that these boxes can be in places that are not staffed. Why? Well, because, no price is too much for a baby when it comes to spending money with Monica Kelsey, but when it comes to having a person present and putting boxes at locations where a baby can get immediate medical help, that's not that important. We can just have a 9/11 alarm on the box. But if you really thought that was the right approach, if you thought unstaffed boxes was okay, that's why I say if we have them, they should be at hospitals where there's medical people there 24/7. But if you thought an unstaffed box was okay, a Simply Safe alarm system for a couple, $300-400 has redundant communications through IP and cellular. These boxes don't. So you're going to have a box that you want to have unstaffed. When you talk about safety testing, there's also design things about the boxes themselves. Design things like, how come it's not designed with a redundant alarm communication system? A Simply Safe for your house can have that for $400 that you can use your IP connection or can use a cellular backup if your IP connection goes down to be able to contact the authorities. Why wouldn't we have, if it's so important and these things are so safe, why weren't they engineered with a alarm response system that had redundancy in its communications if a life is literally on the line? Now, personally, I don't think, they should be in unstaffed locations. And that's one of the issues I think she has in Indiana, is that in Indiana, there's a lot of them at volunteer fire stations that are not staffed. And then in the Indiana law, there's a requirement as to where the geographic location of those fire stations to fully staffed locations. And there's actually a response time requirement. I think I've only dug into one, but I think there's quite a few boxes in Indiana that are violating the law right now in terms of their geographic location when they're not staffed at a volunteer fire station.
Let me, as we're wrapping up, and Grace, if you have a question, just so be standing by. I want to ask you about the $10,000.
Yeah.
The $10,000, because I know that's something that concerns you, and I also want to ask you about the legislation that you said, is it Tom Brinkman? Is he your lawmaker? Or is
Yeah, he's been involved. Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
So those two things. Let's start with the real quick with the 10,000.
So I
Why does that concern you?
because I think that what's happened is this has become. It's not like this is this isn't the Clinton Foundation or something, but this has become a family business. And so the raising of money, the $10,000, has become a monetization of safe haven. And Monica Kelsey's husband is in the business. Her son was in the business. It's like the thing in Woodbury. Other people who are friends of hers are in this business, and it's become a way to make a living. And I'm not against that. Nobody should be against somebody making a living. But if that might blind you to what is the right solutions. So, for example, we put one in Union Township where I live, okay, a box. And I showed you the signage. It says nothing. So we have, I think, 6 fire stations in Union Township. Wouldn't you think that there would be signs to put up on the other fire stations saying, this is the fire station with a box? No, because Monica Kelsey's goal is to sell 6 boxes. So my point is the $10,000 a box, the emotional appeal that can result in fundraising is something that I think is not necessarily all bad, but it is something that can cause people to lose sight. And some of the other people that I have more respect for that I've run into that have been involved in this space, frankly, for a lot longer than Monica Kelsey has, they don't have a shtick to raise money. So she is the gorilla in the group because she's got a model that monetizes safe haven. And she has a goal. She said in a baby box thing just recently, she has a goal of having 1,500 baby boxes across America for a problem. And you and I went back and forth a little bit because there's not good statistics on this. And about, you think about how many babies are abandoned per year. So Monica Kelsey's number is one every 3 days is what she says. So that's like 122. How many of those are, dumpster babies versus left at the doorstep of the fire station? And that is hard to figure out. And it tends to get boiled down to just emotional news stories. I think ultimately, probably in America, when I try to do the computations to the best of my ability, this kind of notion of babies in dumpsters is something like, maybe, I don't know, 30 or 40 a year. And Monica Kelsey, in her own words on video of her own training, says her boxes doesn't help that. It doesn't fix that problem because those people are not wanting their baby to be found alive. And, so I think the $10,000 comes down to more of a bigger picture of losing sight of this. And because I also think that Monica Kelsey, I don't frankly believe, I question some of the ways babies are getting in these boxes. She claims 21 babies have ever been put in these boxes. She claims 20 of them were born at home, not in a hospital, which, 20 out of 21 of them were healthy and had no medical issues. This doesn't make sense. If these babies were actually one step from a dumpster, this kind of thing, there should be a lot more instances of medical issues that would present themselves. So I think part of the $10,000 is that it also creates a motive that we have to have some number of babies going into these boxes in order to sell more boxes. And I frankly think that's a dangerous mix in a world where we should hope that a baby never has to get put in a box, that the moms, have a proper medical delivery. I keep saying the same things. Know their adoption options, and know what options they might have to be able to stay involved in the life of their baby.
Mm-hmm. And then the legislation. What
Yeah.
I mean, what are you hoping to see?
Well, right now we're in it's a lame duck. Baby boxes have never been the subject of any committee hearing in Ohio. Think about this for a second. Why? Because there's certain legislation where things will get jammed into the legislation. So when baby boxes originally came to Ohio, that's how they got in Ohio. They got jammed into another piece of legislation without any hearings. And so now we're kind of in a lame duck session of the legislature until the next session starts next year. So I know that Monica Kelsey will be trying to get gullible lawmakers to override the Department of Health and put something in the law that allows for what she wants more than anything, unmanned baby boxes with no communication redundancy to be in Ohio, no safety testing. And so that's what she will try to do. I'm hopeful that some other reps, I've done a lot to try to at least educate reps as to some of these issues. And I'm hopeful that some other reps, Tom Brinkman being one of them, will basically be sure that if this gets addressed in some sort of lame duck legislation, that everything gets addressed. So, for example, if you want to have unmanned baby boxes, then you have to have communication redundancy on the alarm systems. By the way, I'm against unmanned baby boxes in the first place, but to put in law these things. And because I think that, I'm hopeful, but not optimistic sometimes, that Ohio, I think there's a desperate need for a state that has a little more maturity and will not succumb to bullying, to basically kind of codify baby boxes a little better than they've ever been codified. To address some of the issues of, is the information on a surrendered baby in a baby box at a government facility confidential, or can it go to a third-party company? I think, last thing I'll say on it is, I think that when they put baby boxes in the laws in a lot of these states, they were adding it to traditional safe haven. And I think that they thought that this would become, somebody would manufacture a box and sell a box. What's happened is somebody has used that law, that box is being added to a basically a monetization program that involves a marketing company who happens to sell boxes. And that's why when you look at it, safe haven baby box, where are they? Where are they on traditional safe haven? Where are they doing anything for traditional safe haven? Where are they doing anything for adoption awareness? Without through their box, okay? Where are they doing anything to really help inform mothers? Go to their website, Myrna, and look for anything informing mothers of how they should get proper prenatal care, the importance of proper prenatal care, the importance of a medical delivery. I just was at their website. Their PSA, they have a PSA. Go watch the PSA. It's like 9 minutes. It involves two, what I describe as upper middle class or upper class young girls. Okay. One of them gets pregnant. The one that gets pregnant lives in a beautiful house. So it must be rich parents. And they keep it secret from the parents. They have a non-medically supervised delivery, and the friend goes and puts the baby in the box. Is that what we want pro-life to be? Is that the message we would want as pro-lifers going to our kids? That if you have an unplanned pregnancy and you're a young woman, you should keep it secret from your parents, go get your friend, go have the baby in your bedroom, and then have your friend put it in the box? No, that is not what I know of any person that I know would want the message of the pro-life community to be to young women, that this is what you should do as a loving thing for your baby.
I have seen that. I know exactly what you're referring to. Going back to the legislative process, the grayness, there is grayness
Yeah.
that exists. And
So what I've proposed, by the way, what I harp on and hopefully get legislators to propose, is that in Ohio we should have a program where there is a standard state sign to put on every police station, fire station, and hospital to raise safe haven awareness. For somewhere on the order of $100,000 to $200,000, that could be done in our entire state on every fire station, police station. So things like that. Those are the kind of things I think are important. That any company that gets involved in this process needs to be promoting information on adoption, on custody options, on where to go. I haven't mentioned it here, and I know I'm going on and on some of these things, but when I've lobbied as why isn't Safe Haven Baby Box including the Ohio Department of Jobs and Family Services materials that are legally required to be provided in safe haven situations in their box, they actually got my township to go to the Attorney General to try to get a ruling from the Attorney General that they didn't need to include that information. So that's another thing, tightening up that, for example, that if you're going to have a box, there has to be information on the box that you can knock on the door and get personal help in handing off a baby. So those are some of the parts of the legislation that I have kind of focused on.
Okay, and I'm gonna give the last question to Grace.
I would love to hear, so with all these points that you've raised and brought forward,
Yep.
I think it can be hard to convince someone like Monica Kelsey, who has a lot of ego involvement, a lot at stake, and this narrative where she doesn't want to listen because she's put so much into it. What is like the number one thing that you would want to see change that you think is actually realistic to accomplish for her from her side of this?
Hey, that's a great question. So I had at one point, provided I have it here, sent through her legal counsel. They threatened to sue me 3 times in writing and 1 time through the press for criticizing them. But I put forward a set of business practices changes that I think that they should undertake, and some of them should be no-brainers. Some of them I know that, but at this point they've been around now for what, 6 years maybe, as a company. Get the dang UL listing, or get some sort of proper safety testing. Do things to upgrade. Another thing not required is battery backup on these boxes. Make that part of the plan. Quit doing press events every time there's a surrender. Quit using babies that have been put in one of your boxes in fundraising events, like a circus. Come up on the stage and let's watch the babies dance that we got through the boxes. Quit doing that stuff. So I think there's a set of things that are business practices things that I think, if not now or not with me at some point, what I would encourage Monica Kelsey to do is sit down and look at that list and get her board, not her. Maybe her board's a little more separated from this. To look at those lists and try to do something. Forget about her personal animosity towards me and just look at the list of things and go down that list and say, there's 18 things on the list. Are there, 6 of these that we can see? One of them is, for example, is make public what are the qualifications of people that man their hotline. Isn't that something that as pro-lifers we should care about? Who mans the Safe Haven Baby Box hotline? That we know, and I think this, Myrna, Pam Stencil is supposedly the head of the hotline. Pam Stencil is a abstinence advocate. I'm all for abstinence, but who continually says things that are demeaning to women who have unplanned pregnancies. How can you have the person that runs your helpline for women in unplanned pregnancies be a person that constantly says stuff demeaning to people who have unplanned pregnancies and seems to have a worldview that women that get pregnant outside of wedlock don't deserve to have the babies, and it's great to get them to somebody else. I know I'm kind of going off, Grace, from just your question, but I looked down at this list, and that's one of those things around that hotline that we haven't even talked about here. Is that right or wrong? I think if what Monica Kelsey, I think, is afraid of, other than criticism, is that if people stop and think about some of these issues, like, is it okay for governments to plaster a phone number on the side of government buildings for a hotline where they've done absolutely no vetting of who mans the hotline or what are their procedures or protocols? If people stop and think about this stuff, then Monica Kelsey will have to address these issues. And so I think she can look at me as the evil, incarnate because I've criticized her approaches. But I think she would be well served, and her board and her company would be well served by saying, how can we become something more than a company hawking a box for $10,000 into a company that is about truly helping women and making them aware of their adoption and custody options, getting them involved in the right kind of prenatal care, proper medical delivery. Again, I know on a tangent here with this, but Monica Kelsey on July 11th of this year did a video in that video she talks about how having your baby in a hospital can be a bad thing because you might get outed by the staff as to who gave birth to the baby. what pro-lifer thinks it's a good idea to tell young women in crisis to not have a proper medical delivery? I want to find a pro-lifer that's willing to raise their hand and say, that's what I support. And so I think there's a set of things, and I've already given them a list. I'm glad I might have shared it with you guys, but these are what I think are 18 points about your business practices that I think you should embrace. Her reaction to it in something else, she never responded to me, was just how ridiculous it was that somebody like me would be trying to dictate what their company does. And I think that's exactly an unproductive response to input and counsel from the outside world. And I think that's one of Monica Kelsey's, that's her blind spot, is that if not me, if not now, is that her unwillingness to look at views that would be critical of hers. Because in real life, we all want to get along, we all want to have, love one another, but in real life, criticism is the thing that advances causes. And so I think she would be well served to look at some of the practices and look at some of the things and say, let's become a much better version of ourselves than what Safe Haven Baby Box is right now.
Grace, do you have any other questions?
No, I think that covers it for me. I don't know if you have any other wrap-up ones.
I don't, because my goodness, I said 45 minutes.
And we're over?
We're about an hour 15.
Okay.
Yeah, but my goodness, wow. I do appreciate, hold on, let me get do appreciate your time, and yeah, this has been very helpful. And
well, I would like to too, and I don't know what, in the sequence of your talking to people where I fit in that timeline, but, I'm glad to address, anything, I'm sure if you asked Monica about me, I'm not her favorite person. But like I said, maybe there's even a role here. And Grace, kind of your question is, I don't have anything. I don't even know, other than, through behaviors and TikTok videos, I don't know Monica Kelsey. And I just think that is a pro-life community. And if she's a part of the pro-life community, like I said, I think, these areas are something we should think about, because just, whatever you feel about boxes are not in and of themselves a solution. They might be part of a solution for certain narrow cases in my mind, but they're not the pro-life solution. And I think the pro-life solution has to be a much more personal, loving, and engaging solution. And, in which these kind of things, put your baby in a box and slam the door, is truly, truly a last resort that we never want to see happen.
yeah. Well, again, thank you, Chris. We appreciate it, and yeah, just valid and good points made. So thank you again, Kristen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jumping your time.
Hey, if any of the audio, if there's things because I don't know if the connection issue has been on my end or on your end, or what's what I'm saying, or breaking up, but just if there's anything that we need to fix because of connection issues, let me know.
Okay, I will. All right, everybody. Thanks
All right.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.